So in understanding the non-duality child, what we are really looking at here is a child who engages into an embodiment that is able to meet and reconcile the dualities of this world. And this is no small feat. This is a massive undertaking to exist a geometry to embody as non-duality, to embody a non-duality consciousness. It's not an airy-fairy love and light, gonna heal the world with a magic wand kind of thing. It's very much in the face of all that is dark and toxic and brutal about this world. It's the place where a non-duality embodiment is able to meet, engage, and reconcile the light and dark of this world in all its different faces and guises. And this is happening as a constant. So the embodiment of a child into a unified embodiment geometry that is designed to reconcile duality. So from existing in a ninth dimensional unified geometry of embodiment and spin, the architecture itself is designed to spin the positive negative, the light dark, the polarities, all of the dualities of life, to spin them around the 0 point, to reconcile and neutralize, to bring them to a neutral point or a 0 point. So the embodiment itself is from a 0 point in spin through all duality to return to a 0 point. And that's in every heartbeat. It's in every movement of the body on this earth. It's in every interaction. And the day-to-day existence that is able to meet and reconcile dualities is phenomenal in its capacity. So this child has a capacity to exist in all environments and be okay, to be out there in the world, to be completely solid. You could, to be in any different school system, it doesn't matter what, to be in any environment around any people, to eat and consume food from any table to any flavors, it's the point where we fully understand what a non-duality embodiment is, because it's the reconciliation of the dualities through the embodiment itself. So through the capacity to digest all dualities, to take into the body the good, the bad, and the ugly, to actually reconcile from within the cellular form and the architecture or the embodiment currency itself that can meet and reconcile the dualities in our world. This is where real change takes place. This is not the magic wand that wishes fairy dust and sprinkles on a world in order to save it. This is not the little bubble of light that wafts around in a high frequency, sending out good vibes. I mean, realistically look at what this is for this child. A non-duality embodiment at a high level of unified architecture means that the architecture itself, the architecture of the embodiment of the child, is designed to be in the world in a non-duality dynamic of soul body and dynamic of interrelationship with the world. So they have the architecture, they have the capacity to actually reconcile and spin dualities around a 0 point, to reconcile the duality itself. So this is the child born into the family that will literally absorb into their cells, digest through their cells, all of the family dynamics, all of the dualities, the goods, the bads, the lights, the darks, everything that's playing out, and literally just take it all in and spin it, reconcile it, meet it face to face, create actual real cellular change within the family, within the community. These are the kids that are in the forefront of all of the separation and all of the boundaries and all of the distort that's playing out. They're in the face of the other. And you can look at this in your child's behavior in terms of, like, they're literally in the face of other people, and because there's no point at which they are in separate bodies, respecting separate boundaries and staying in their own separate body, in their own separate boundary, to process their own separate stuff, because this is simply not what is happening for these children. They are not in a linear body that is essentially only concerned about processing its own embodiment information and then sensing what's happening in the world around. And if they're intended to hold space or healing or somehow transmute or transform the information or the suffering in the world around. So the healer linear embodiment process, the way of processing the world around, which has its ups and downs and ins and outs. And we talk about that in the session detail, but this is not how this child exists. So the functioning of bringing everything into the cells to spin around a 0 point, to reconcile to a neutral point. So this child will be able to digest all dualities. Think about the foods that we feed our children. They're what we give them that's good, what we keep away from them and don't want them to digest and ingest into their body, which we consider bad. Our goods, bads, rights, or wrongs, the glutens, the sugars, the colorings, the flavorings, all of the our view of the duality of food. And yet these children are actually fully capable of digesting all food as consciousness beyond duality. So to them, the gluten-free pasta and the gluten pasta are actually precisely the same. And their cells simply hold a higher coherency of form and function. What informs the cell and what exists the circuitry or currency of spin around the 0 point in the non-duality of the embodiment is essentially what informs the cellular health, vitality, and integrity. So this is all a functioning of a system that is designed to spin and integrate dualities into a non-duality point, a 0 point neutral point. And in that infinite neutral point, embodied in cellular form, we have an existence of embodiment as human beyond the dualities of this world. And that's a true point of freedom. It's a true, infinite, real point of humanity's freedom to embody as the infinite non-duality consciousness that we all know ourselves to be. And so the resting essence of that is actually stunning and simple and very neutral around a 0 point, and all of life is engaged to and from that neutral 0 point, and all dualities can be digested. And the understanding that we cannot get to this 0 point and neutral point through avoidance of the duality. So where the inverse is simply not true. We cannot just take in the good things into our body and be in avoidance of literally all the bad things and all the yin yang, and split out our embodiment into just the good and not the bad. Then we cannot reach a still point or a 0 point or a restful point of non-duality in that way. We are actually polarizing. We're actually becoming more and more polarized by focusing on that which is just the love and light and keeping out the bad and the toxic. And this is where our children are showing us the next level of embodiment capacity that's able to literally embody and reconcile all dualities, which we are ultimately designed to do as humans. So there's a fuller, open functioning here because it's non-boundaried. It's not experiencing the world through threat and need to protect and guard and evaluate and keep in and keep out. It's not in a constant monitoring and trying to be okay and trying to survive and trying to sustain some minimal level functioning. All of this really is shown in its limitation in a full view, if you like, when we look at a child system that's not functioning in that limitation, that can digest all of the colors, all of the foods, all of the wavelength, can exist in any environment and simply be okay from their own core 0 point embodied circuitry. And it's quite stunning to watch. And then you can look at where this is not a simple reality for this child. Like, this can be really, really hard to be in that forefront of meeting and reconciling and resolving dualities. Can be a massive overwhelm for a child, can be a massive intensity in their body, can be really neurologically overwhelming, can be really digestively overwhelming. Like, there are a lot of symptomologies and there are a lot of challenges in the bodies of these children which are presenting, and we can listen to how that where there's a non-meet of the child, especially where the world around the child is seeing the child in linear and imposing boundaries and imposing limitations and pulling a functioning system into non-function. Because once you put a unified system is designed to spin a duality, but if we pull that into separation and pull it into boundary and pull it into something that behaves linearly, then that system's not going to function. It's going to wobble and it's going to fall in some way. It's going to move into a compromise because it's designed to spin duality. It's designed to exist in spin, to exist in that spin function circuitry. So if you take that out, if you pull into just hold into separate and hold into linear, and we're just going to eat the good foods and we're going to keep safe by doing all the things that would support a body in separation, then it actually creates a dysfunction because you've taken the spin away. You've taken it's like a top, if you think of a child's spinning top. That's when it's in spin, it's in this absolute perfect 0 point. And it's exquisite in its spin. It's still in its spin. It's in motion and stillness at the same time. It's in action and rest. It's in dynamic stillness. So that dynamic stillness is fundamental to the child's body functioning. Because if we take that away and then ask the top to stand still and not spin, and then stand upright in a linear way and somehow be okay, it really isn't. It's going to fall over because it's not in its dynamic motion. It's not in its fundamental resting point of that dynamic stillness. And it's not spinning duality. So at that point, it can become really compromised. And there was a session I did just the other day for a child who was very underweight and had many levels of digestive symptomology, and you could feel where he had absorbed an emotional tapestry of humanity, and it was far bigger than the psychological emotions of his direct family experience and his family dynamic and relationship. It was a bigger emotional tapestry, and it was really absorbed into the very marrow of his bones. And he's designed to feel the world in this way. He's designed to exist in a motion of transformation, a motion of his embodiment through the world that is designed to process this, that is designed to exist in his embodiment, in his true embodiment currency. How each child meets the world and how we move through it is part of the embodiment story. And when it's functioning, it's functioning. So he knows how to literally take this emotional tapestry and action it through his movement, his run, his dance, his body tissue articulation. So there's a capacity to do that. And then there's a point where this child is met through the eyes of a linear world that do not see or touch or really listen to who he is or how he is or what he needs, and have held him into a non-function. So it was really interesting to see where that there was no dynamic motion in his body. It had pulled in this emotional tapestry of humanity, so wider level fallen humanity, and really intricate detail in that. And it was sitting in a still point in the heart that wasn't actually a still point at all, because it was a non-breath point. It was a point between the heartbeat, between the breath, where there was no breath. The point between breathing in and out, where actually there is no breath, and you're waiting for the ignition of breath. And the point between the heartbeats where you're waiting, where there's that next ignition of the next heartbeat. Except the ignition wasn't there. He was trying to find it in his body himself. He was trying to and it was really pulling on the resource. It was really using this resource, and there was a lot of compromise in the system that had pulled and absorbed this information in which, in a functioning body, he knows how to move. But the pull into something so separate and so linear that was not, it didn't have anywhere to move. So there was no engagement of the core heart. There was no engagement of the currency of the body. It needed somewhere to move. It needed to move through a bigger body. It needed a vaster currency of motion. It needed an ignition. You could feel all of those things, and where when it had ignition, there was a spin, there was a function, there was a dynamic motion. It had color, it had vibrancy, and so that's that's ultimately where the health of this child's body is going to be, when this is in function, the way that his soul is designed to exist in his body. When that's in function, then there's stunning health, vitality, dynamic stillness through core, articulate expression of the soul through the tissues and the lived life experiences of the child. So all of this becomes compromised in its non-function. And then to meet that child in a linear way that's trying to somehow fix or resolve his issues from a linear place, there isn't a meet, there's no touch, there's no currency. So there's no way for this child to process that which he is designed to process, because we simply can't take that away and say, well, let's protect you from the world. Let's make sure you don't get overwhelmed. Let's keep you, let's keep you in a quiet environment. Let's feed you all these good nourishing foods. Let's try and put some weight on. To take away the child's designed function is to exist them into a box of non-function. And it's not who they are. It's not who they've come to be. So a child that's come into the world to exist in a non-duality motion of actual embodied currency and actual change and actual cellular shift, they are meeting the world in a very different way that does not need the protecting and keeping held in a bubble, and is fully able to function in circuitries and coherencies in amazingly diverse environments that as sensitive beings we would never put ourselves in, because it's too overwhelming and too much information, and our bodies would get wouldn't be able to process it all. So the difference in processing, the difference in the capacity of being able to process, the difference in the levels of where function exists in the dualities in spin, but to take that away and pull it into linear, there isn't a function. And so the child then, this child in particular, was in danger of compromised systemic levels in his body. You could literally see where there was a potential to shut down, and then there was a potential to shut down emotionally into what could be quite a dark, depressed place in a child that's feeling all of this emotional tapestry of the world. And look at all the children today in the world as it is today, and here is a massive, and they are feeling everything beyond all the things we want them to feel or want to protect them from. It's like these are global children. They are here to make a difference to a global humanity. They are feeling the ills of a global society in its duality, in its loss of freedom, in its all of its distort. And that's not an easy place. And the heart of the mother wishes to protect our children and maintain the innocence and purity that's not contaminated by all this harshness in the world. Yet if we really look at how our children are functioning, their baseline circuitry is able to meet and reconcile those dualities. So they don't need to be afraid of them. They're not going to damage them. They're not going to hurt them. They're not going to take them down. It's a very different level of function. And in that non-duality function of all spin, of all dualities around the 0 point, they can return to a very known point in their body in that non-duality stillness at a core 0 point. And that's a phenomenal point of freedom, because ultimately, if you look at any spiritual teaching that's worth its salt, that's where it's trying to get to. That's the ultimate point that everyone in doing their work is trying to reach as embodiment, a non-duality, infinite, source core 0 point embodiment. And the difference in where those words and those intentions and those concepts are used outside of the body, an infinite non-duality source core consciousness, and the place where we can access that as feeling, as consciousness, as known, as concept, as yes, this is who we are. And then to look at where we are in our bodies with that, to look at it really truthfully, to be in a non-duality consciousness of mind, of thinking, of thought, of awareness, of understanding of the world, but to exist in a body that's still in limitation based on duality, that's still in food restrictions, that's still in goods and bads, what's okay, what's not okay, what's nourishing my body at a functioning level of duality, how my cellular mechanics are functioning in a polarized spin, in a polarized embodiment. So where the information to cellular form and function is through polarity. So it's not through a non-duality embodiment. And that's a massive, massive point of difference. And to understand the child in a non-duality embodiment takes us on a massive journey of understanding the difference between that extremely polarized nth degree of spirit matter split body at a cellular functioning level and embodiment architecture to a body in a unified architecture and a 0-point spin of duality, able to reconcile duality to a 0-point, and a child in a non-duality embodiment at a 0-point spin, no longer in the polarity physics of spin, in a non-duality point, 0-point spin. And that's phenomenal. Like, this is a stunning, stunning embodiment point. So this is where we are beginning from and listening to these children. And we come full circle through all different levels of embodiment of human back to this point where it is a pure spirit matter point. It's a point where there is no gap between spirit matter. And that's a massive thing to sit in and understand directly from your body. And this is where these children are showing us in their bodies what this truly means, and the face of the child in a non-duality embodiment. That knows themselves as all faces of all beings, of all bodies, of all consciousness embodied. Because all dynamics of duality are inherently existing in their core spin. All dualities reconciled. The point at which we can take the diversity of humanity and all of its split and all of its encoded form and all of its expressions through incarnation into duality, and you put all of that in spin to a simple 0-point, that in a non-duality embodiment must know and be in touch to all aspects of the duality, that must inherently have embodied and know the light and the dark to meet a point of spin beyond reconciling the light and dark. So all those aspects of all the splits through all time are known inherently within the cellular form of the child in a non-duality body. And this is the beautiful and massive story of these children.